you sinners and saints. It's TJ the MotorSage here today. I'd like to talk to you a bit about the character traits from that move from one generation to another. It happens in people, it happens in automobiles, it happens in churches, and happens in society all around us. Hey, all you folks. Today's a very special day for me and for many other people. You see, today is a special time that's been set aside to remember the contribution of many veterans in our midst, the veterans who endured the days of the Vietnam War. There are those that we get to speak to, those that came back from that struggle. And we also are brought to the time where we remember those who did not return from that terrible time. And lastly, we come to the place where we remember those who are missing in action and still have not been found. I remember at that time I was just due to get out of the service, and just as things were starting to heat up. I had been in the Cuban Missile Crisis days, and when it came time to re-enlist, I decided to get out of the military, but I had a lot of friends who remained in, and I had a lot of friends that left after I returned home and went to the Vietnam War effort. So my hat's off to you. I salute you on this very special day. I remember during that time there was a lot of problems in families because of the war. One in particular I remember was the fact that the elder brother went off to the war and went to serve, and the other brother, he fought in demonstration against the war and eventually ran off into Canada to stay out of the fighting. And it would seem that that family would reconcile after the war was over in such a long time, even unto today, with the exception that the brother who went off to Vietnam never returned. He was killed over there, and the other brother, the second born, had that to live with, to contend with the family for many years after. Kind of reminds me of the return of the prodigal son, except the older son wasn't there to receive him, and even complained about his being present. Those two sons remind me of the two paths that people can take even within the same family, the same upbringing. I remember years ago in the mid-50s, I believe it was, the Chrysler Corporation came out with a very special engine called the Fire Dome V8. The cylinder head of the engine was what we call a Hemi. And I don't know whether it had anything to do with it, but it came out during the time when the atomic bomb was really feared, and we used to have to do drills under the seat. Well, I remember that engine, the Fire Dome V8, and it was quite powerful. Today, when we talk about the Hemi engine that we see in vehicles running around, is not quite the same engine. See, the Hemi back then came out, and I think it was 331 cubic inches to start with, and gradually went up to about 394, I believe, 394, and spent most of his time in the Chrysler 300. It was in the Chrysler Imperial. I think it was in those big heavy vehicles because it was a big heavy engine, weighed near 1,000 pounds. So, but still an extremely powerful motor, and many hot rodders took the engines out of the Chrysler and the Imperials and put them in small automobiles for the power that they had. The problem with the Fire Dome Hemi head engines was that they were air polluters. We entered the age of air pollution, and consequently Chrysler got away from the Hemi head and went to what we call the wedge engines. The wedge engines, well, they came out, I think they were spawned from the old 318 V8 engine, and then they came out with the 383 and the 413 and eventually the 426. At the same time, the Hemi head engine was returned at the end of the dirty days of the automobile industry, trying to meet pollution standards, and we came out with the 426 Hemi. So you had two brothers side by side, both 426 cubic inch engines made by the same manufacturer. Well, two 426 cubic inch engines contended with one another, and eventually the wedge engine became what we call the 440. It was the big guy on the block. The 440 was the engine to have, and it could be made available even in the small vehicles, all the way down into the Barracudas and the Challenger pony cars, as they called them. And was quite a powerful run, like families today should be getting past what happened in those terrible days of the Vietnam War.